1978, Honda unveiled a motorcycle unlike anything the world had ever seen. 6 cylinders, 6 exhaust pipes, a sound like nothing on 2 wheels. It was called the CBX, and it stunned engineers, journalists, and riders alike. But behind its glittering chrome and howling engine lay a story of brilliance colliding with bad timing. Most motorcycles of the era used 2 or 4 cylinders. Honda dared to build 6, packed into a single engine barely wider than a car's front seat. It was an engineering feat that seemed almost impossible to fit onto a motorcycle frame, yet Honda pulled it off. The engine alone weighed more than most complete motorcycles of the time. 6 pistons, 24 valves, and 2 overhead camshafts worked in perfect harmony, producing a mechanical symphony that no 4-cylinder machine could match. This was Honda's ultimate flex of engineering muscle. Riders who threw a leg over the CBX described it as riding a race bike from another planet. The sound alone turned heads on every street, but this incredible machine carried a secret flaw that would shape its entire legacy. The CBX could scream past 9,000 RPM with a sound engineers compared to a Formula One car. It was breathtaking, thrilling, and utterly unlike anything else on the road, yet this same brilliance would soon become its greatest burden. To understand the CBX, we must go back to Honda's racing roots. In the 1960s, Honda had already built 6-cylinder Grand Prix racing motorcycles that dominated the 250 cubic centimeters and 350 cubic centimeters classes. That racing DNA never left the company, and by the mid-1970s, Honda wanted to bring it to the street. Leading this ambitious project was Shoichiro Irimajiri, the same engineer who had designed Honda's legendary 6-cylinder Grand Prix racers a decade earlier. Now Honda gave him a new challenge: build a 6-cylinder engine for the street, one that would announce Honda's engineering dominance to the entire world. Honda already had a hit with the CB750, the bike that started the superbike revolution. But by the late 1970s, competitors like Kawasaki and Suzuki were catching up fast. Honda needed something extraordinary to reclaim the technological crown, and a 6-cylinder engine was the boldest answer imaginable. Honda's design goal was audacious: fit 6 cylinders, 2 camshafts, and 24 valves into a package narrow enough to lean into corners without dragging the engine on the pavement. Engineers had to rethink everything about how a motorcycle engine could be built. The crankshaft alone was a masterpiece of precision. 6 connecting rods spun in sequence, each one perfectly balanced to keep vibration to a minimum. This kind of engineering had never before been squeezed into a mass-produced motorcycle. Feeding the engine required 6 separate carburetors, each one perfectly synchronized. Getting all 6 to breathe evenly was one of the greatest development challenges Honda's engineers faced, and countless hours were spent tuning them to perfection. Building a frame around such a wide engine was no small task. Honda engineers designed a double cradle steel frame that hugged the 6-cylinder power plant tightly, keeping the motorcycle as narrow and manageable as possible despite its unusual width. Every visual detail of the CBX was designed to communicate power and prestige. The elongated fuel tank, the 6 exhaust headers fanning outward, and the deep candy paint told riders instantly that this was no ordinary Honda. Before the CBX ever reached a showroom, Honda tested prototype engines relentlessly on dynamometers, pushing them to their limits to prove reliability. Engineers wanted a machine that could deliver Grand Prix performance without sacrificing everyday dependability. After years of development, Honda finally unveiled the CBX1000 to the public in 1978. It was unlike anything the motorcycle world had witnessed, a rolling statement of what Honda's engineers were truly capable of building. At the heart of the CBX sat a 1,047 cubic centimeters air-cooled inline-6 engine with double overhead camshafts and 24 valves. This configuration allowed the engine to rev higher and breathe more freely than any 4-cylinder rival on the market. Cooling 6 cylinders packed tightly together demanded careful engineering. Honda designed deep, closely spaced fins around each cylinder to dissipate heat efficiently, relying entirely on airflow rather than the liquid cooling systems that would later become standard. Behind that magnificent engine sat a 5-speed transmission, tasked with handling the substantial power flowing from 6 cylinders. Engineers refined the gear ratios carefully to balance the CBX's high-revving nature with usable acceleration on the street. Up front, telescopic forks handled the considerable weight of the machine. Honda tuned the suspension to cope with a motorcycle far heavier than typical superbikes of the day, a direct consequence of carrying 6 cylinders instead of 4. Dual rear shock absorbers completed the original suspension setup, a conventional design compared to the radical engine above it. Honda's engineers understood that the 6-cylinder power plant was the star of the show, and the chassis simply needed to keep up. Fuel delivery through 6 carburetors required an intricate linkage system so that every throttle input opened all 6 slides in perfect unison. Any imbalance would cause rough running, so Honda invested heavily in precision manufacturing tolerances. Firing 6 cylinders in sequence demanded a sophisticated ignition system for its time. Honda engineered a battery and coil ignition capable of delivering precise spark timing to every cylinder, keeping the engine smooth even at high engine speeds. The engine's width remained one of the CBX's defining engineering puzzles. 6 cylinders in a row meant the engine spanned wider than any production motorcycle before it, forcing Honda to angle the foot pegs and redesign the lower frame rails for ground clearance. To keep the engine as compact as possible, Honda tucked the alternator and starter motor behind the cylinders rather than beside them. This clever packaging helped narrow the overall engine width, just enough to make the motorcycle rideable. 6 individual exhaust headers eventually met in a shared collector before exiting through twin mufflers. Honda tuned the exhaust system not only for performance, but for that unmistakable high-pitched howl that would become the CBX's signature sound. Honda equipped the CBX with a comprehensive instrument cluster, a nod to its role as the brand's flagship model. Riders could watch the tachometer needle climb with a sense of anticipation, knowing 6 cylinders were spinning in perfect coordination beneath them. Stopping such a powerful and heavy machine required strong front disc brakes, a feature Honda continued to refine throughout the CBX's production run. Braking performance needed to match the engine's ferocious character. When journalists first saw the finished engine on display, many called it a work of art rather than mere machinery. Honda had essentially placed a race-derived masterpiece into a motorcycle intended for everyday riders. Managing the electrical demands of 6 cylinders, dual camshafts, and a full instrument cluster required one of the most complex wiring systems Honda had ever put into a motorcycle, adding further weight and complexity to an already ambitious machine. By the time engineering was finalized, the CBX stood as one of the most technically advanced production motorcycles ever built. But brilliance in the workshop would soon be tested against the harsh realities of the open road. Honda claimed the CBX produced around 105 horsepower at 9,000 RPM, an extraordinary figure for a production motorcycle in 1978. It was among the most powerful machines a rider could legally buy anywhere in the world. That power translated into blistering acceleration for its era, with the CBX capable of covering the quarter mile in roughly 11.5 seconds. Few motorcycles on sale could keep pace with its 6-cylinder fury. Top speed hovered around 130 miles per hour, an eye-watering number for street-legal motorcycles of the late 1970s. Magazines of the day praised its straight-line performance as nothing short of sensational. Motorcycle journalists who tested the CBX were stunned by its smoothness at high RPM. Where 4-cylinder engines buzzed and vibrated near redline, the CBX's 6 cylinders spun with an almost turbine-like calm, a trait few had experienced before. However, that smooth power came at a cost. The CBX weighed close to 250 kilograms, making it noticeably heavier than its 4-cylinder rivals. Cornering the machine required more effort and confidence than lighter competitors demanded. Much of that extra weight came directly from the engine itself. 6 cylinders, 12 extra valves, and an additional set of connecting rods added significant mass compared to the 4-cylinder engines found in competing superbikes. Kawasaki's Z1300 and other 6-cylinder machines soon entered the conversation as rivals, but most competitors stuck with 4-cylinder engines. Riders now had a genuine choice between raw simplicity and Honda's 6-cylinder sophistication. Fuel economy suffered under the strain of feeding 6 thirsty cylinders. Riders reported noticeably shorter range between fill-ups compared to 4-cylinder machines, a trade-off that came bundled with the CBX's extraordinary performance. Braking performance, while strong for the era, still had to work harder to slow the CBX's substantial mass. Engineers and testers alike noted that stopping distances were respectable but not class-leading given the motorcycle's weight. Handling at low speed also revealed the CBX's heft. Parking lot maneuvers and tight city streets exposed the weight that Honda's engineers had worked so hard to manage at higher speeds on open roads. Despite these compromises, road testers consistently praised the CBX's straight-line thrills and unmatched engine character. Nothing else on the market sounded or revved quite like it, and that alone won over countless enthusiasts. Competitors like the Suzuki GS1000 and Kawasaki Z1-R offered lighter, more agile alternatives with nearly comparable power. For riders who valued cornering precision over engine drama, these rivals often made more practical sense. Honda's engineers had built something extraordinary, but the CBX's greatest strength, its glorious 6-cylinder engine, was also its greatest weakness. Extra weight, cost, and complexity followed wherever that engine went. All of this engineering came at a premium price, positioning the CBX above many of its 4-cylinder competitors. For riders on a budget, that price difference often proved decisive when choosing which superbike to buy. Still, for those who wanted the most technologically advanced motorcycle money could buy, nothing came close to matching the CBX's blend of engineering ambition and raw 6-cylinder theater. Honda and privateer teams experimented with racing versions of the CBX, hoping its powerful engine could translate into competitive success on the track. The bike's raw output made it tempting for endurance and superbike racing efforts. On the racetrack, however, the CBX's extra weight became a genuine handicap. Lighter 4-cylinder machines could outcorner it lap after lap, and no amount of horsepower could fully compensate for carrying so much extra mass through the turns. Some teams shed weight through lightweight bodywork and modified frames, chasing every possible advantage. Yet the fundamental physics of 6 cylinders versus 4 remained a difficult obstacle to overcome on demanding racetracks. While the CBX never dominated championship racing the way Honda had hoped, it did earn respect in endurance events, where reliability and straight-line speed mattered as much as outright cornering ability. The CBX's engine proved remarkably durable under racing stress, a testament to Honda's engineering discipline. Even when overall race results disappointed, the power plant itself rarely let its riders down. Mechanics who worked on racing CBX engines often described the 6-cylinder layout as both a joy and a challenge, requiring specialized knowledge to tune 6 carburetors perfectly under competition pressure. Despite valiant efforts from privateer racers, the CBX ultimately could not match the agility of purpose-built superbikes designed specifically for competition. Honda's flagship remained better suited to the open road than the racetrack. Honda eventually shifted its racing ambitions toward lighter, more focused machines, allowing the CBX to settle into its true identity as a road-going showcase of engineering rather than a dedicated racing weapon. Even without major championship glory, the CBX's racing appearances added to its legend, proving that Honda was willing to test its most radical creation against the toughest competition in motorsport. The CBX's racing chapter, while not filled with championships, cemented its reputation as one of the most ambitious and daring machines Honda had ever built for public consumption. When the CBX arrived in American showrooms, it became an instant sensation among enthusiasts who craved something extraordinary. Crowds gathered simply to hear its engine start, a sound unlike anything else on the sales floor. Sales, however, told a more complicated story. The CBX's high price and heavy weight limited its appeal to a smaller, more dedicated group of buyers, rather than the mass market Honda's other models enjoyed. In Europe, the CBX found an audience that appreciated its engineering artistry, though narrow roads and higher fuel prices made its size and thirst less practical for everyday European riders. Owners who bought the CBX often became lifelong devotees, drawn to its unmistakable character and the pride of owning one of the most technically impressive motorcycles ever produced. By 1981, Honda revised the CBX, adding a fairing and softer suspension tuning to reposition it as a sport touring machine rather than a pure high-performance superbike, an acknowledgement that the original formula needed adjustment. This later version traded some of the CBX's raw aggression for comfort and stability, appealing to riders who wanted long-distance touring capability paired with that unforgettable six-cylinder soundtrack. Despite these revisions, commercial success remained modest compared to Honda's more affordable four-cylinder lineup. The CBX never became a mass-market success story, but it was never truly meant to be one. Honda ultimately ended CBX production in 1982, closing the chapter on this remarkable experiment. Total production numbers remained relatively low compared to Honda's mainstream models, reinforcing the CBX's status as a specialty machine. Though its production run was relatively brief, the CBX left an undeniable mark on motorcycling history, proving that engineering ambition alone could create a legend, even without dominating sales charts. Its legacy grew stronger with time as riders and collectors began to appreciate just how special the CBX truly was, a machine built not for practicality, but for pure engineering glory. Today, well-preserved Honda CBX models command impressive prices among collectors, with pristine examples fetching values far beyond their original showroom price, a clear sign of how highly this machine is now regarded. Collectors seek out the CBX specifically for its six-cylinder engine, a feature so rare in motorcycling history that it instantly sets any example apart from ordinary vintage machines. The CBX's influence can still be felt today, inspiring later multi-cylinder motorcycles and proving that manufacturers could push engineering boundaries even when practicality suggested otherwise. The Honda CBX remains a symbol of what happens when engineers are given the freedom to build without compromise, a motorcycle whose brilliance and burden were one and the same. In the end, the Honda CBX was too advanced, too heavy, and too expensive to conquer the market. But in engineering terms, it remains one of the boldest motorcycles ever created, a six-cylinder masterpiece that time has only made more legendary.